Well, hello there. My name is Cameron. I am an intern here at the Urban College Center, and I'll be presenting on the butterflies of the Midwest. And actually, none of these butterflies here are from the Midwest, but I thought they were cool anyway. So we have in the lower left-hand corner, we have the queen butterfly, which is native more southward, and we have the atlas moth in the upper right, which is a pretty cool things to see. But we're here to talk about the Midwest, so we can get these off the screen eventually. So, what are butterflies? Butterflies are part of the order Lepidoptera, so that includes all butterflies and moths. So, just being part of the same order, they have a very similar life cycles, but of course, it's going to depend on what species you look at and where they are. But generally, we have adults that eventually lay eggs. These eggs, after a few days, will hatch into caterpillars. Caterpillars will start eating, going through different stages, which is called instars, which eventually reaching their last instar will go hunker down to have chrysalis. Chrysalis will then allow for the adult to develop and will eventually merge and start the cycle all over again. So we've all seen butterflies, moths just flying around, but what makes a butterfly and what makes a moth? So both, like I said earlier, both of them are part of the order Lepidoptera, but all butterflies are part of the suborder Rhopalocera. So all butterflies have the same descendants, are descended from the same ancestor, and continue from that line. While moths are not all part of the same suborder, so they're kind of all else case. So if it's not a butterfly, it's going to be a moth. But taxonomically, that's cool. But what's that going to get you when you look outside? Nothing. So sort of, and we can discuss characteristics of how they look outside, so you can better distinguish them while looking around your yard. So, of course, we have tons of species around the Midwest and even more across the rest of the world. So, being able to pinpoint exact characteristics of what makes a butterfly, what makes a moth, is not going to be possible. But we can sort of narrow down the general characteristics here. So, with butterflies, they generally have thinned club antenna. So, on the left here, we have the red admiral. You can sort of see that's pretty thin, has like a little club. And same with the wild indigo dusky wing in the middle. And they're generally diurnal. So diurnal meaning that they appear during the day. So you see if something flying around during the day, it's most likely a butterfly. But of course, there are some moths you might see during the day, like the hummingbird moth. So like I said, not an entirely cohesive list of set characteristics, but can get you by. And moths, generally nocturnal. So see them, a lot of them flying around at night. Some of them have like thick feathery antenna, but I can see on the right here with this yellow underwing, it has neither. So it's a pretty general characteristics, but otherwise kind of as you look at stuff outside, you kind of get a feel of what is a moth, what is a butterfly. I see between the admiral and the dusky wing, they have very similar body shapes compared to what the yellow underwing has. So starting off, I can't ignore the main butterflies you'll see. You gotta get the popular ones out of the way, especially with the monarch. So the monarch, well known across the Americas as it has large populations, bright, beautiful orange color with the black, and you see them everywhere. And as you see later in the fall, they do the large migration back to Mexico, where you see them in the winter, all a bunch of monarchs on trees, which is a very cool sight to see. So monarchs specifically lay their eggs on milkweed plants. So there are tons of different milkweed plants. Here in the Midwest, we'll find common milkweed, we have world milkweed, butterfly milkweed, purple milkweed, and even other areas of the country, you have tropical milkweed, California milkweed, so on and so forth. There are plenty of milkweed species out there, but they solely lay on there. Mostly that's because they have a toxin in the milkweed, which the caterpillars will eat and absorb that into their body, which allows them to taste disgusting to predators. So as a caterpillar, it will stay, the toxin will stay with them as an adult too, and allows them, so predator tries to eat one, it will give a disgusting taste and hopefully deter further predation further on. And because of that, the monarchs now have rock this nice orange color as like a visual deterrent, like, hey, don't eat me, I'm not gonna taste good either way. But of course, evolution has found a way, not in here in the Midwest, but in Mexico, there is an oriole that's able to taste a different toxin, so it's able to easily tell if this monarch has, oh, is it very toxic, they can spit it out, or if it's not, and then you freely consume it. So nature always finds a way somehow. Yeah, but now monarchs are gonna be as toxic as each other because some different milkweed species have different varying levels of toxicity. So it really depends on which milkweed monarch raised on. Next, I'm gonna go to cabbage white. Cabbage white is everywhere in the Midwest, especially along the easternmost of the United States too. If you see a small little butterfly that's white flying around during the day, especially in urban areas, it's most likely gonna be a cabbage white. So cabbage whites are from the Europe, Eurasia, and were introduced here into the Americas around like 200-ish years ago. They're just prevalent throughout. Like the name suggests, cabbage whites like cabbage-based plants and other cultivars around the same species. So we have cabbage, collard greens, bok choy, broccoli, kale. We have plenty of different things that they like. So if you're ever farming those, I would watch out for cabbage white eggs, as they can eat through your plants pretty quickly. But that's not the only plant they rely on. So they're pretty prevalent everywhere. So I couldn't not talk about them, because even if you see a little white thing flying around, it's gonna be a cabbage white most likely. So I put 2 pictures of each on here because these 2 species are sexually dimorphic, meaning that both sexes present differently. So at the top 2 pictures with the 1 dots on for the cabbage white and the monarch, those are the males, while the bottoms are the females. So specifically like on the monarch, like I said, you have the dot on the hind wings, and then for the females, it doesn't have a dot, and it also has much more broader the lines on its wings. So those would be very easy visual identifiers if you were looking out. Sometimes if it's on a plant, it might be easy to see the dot compared to the veins, but if it's flying around, it might be able to see the fold more. So if you ever want to look at, like, oh, is that a male or female? Similar to that, we have the female cabbage white, which has 2 dots on its wings. So it's a pretty cool identifier of them. Next, going on to sulfurs. Sulfurs are small yellow butterflies, which led to the name being called sulfurs due to the yellow color. And they fly around pretty similar size to cabbage whites, I would say. And they're just kind of pretty cool to see. They're much more later in summer. I feel like they emerge compared to, we see a lot of cabbage whites appear. And we have various different species here in the Midwest. We have like the little yellow and the clouded sulfur, but there's not much known about them comparatively to some other butterfly species like the monarch. But a lot of sulfurs can have a white form. So like I said, most times you'll see a white butterfly in the Midwest, it's gonna be cabbage white, but also sometimes it could be a sulfur. And also, of course, some other white butterflies more northern. But these in urban areas here, like Milwaukee or other urban areas, Madison, or in Michigan, most likely to be cabbage. And they also have a mud flowing behavior where they can group together and just have like a bunch of them just like drinking out of a puddle together, which is pretty cute. Next, I will go on to swallowtails. Swallowtails are part of the subfamily Papilionae, and we have a few of them in here in the Midwest. Most of them are more tropical species, as that's kind of their more warmer temperature, so not that many. But here you most likely see the tiger swallowtail, followed by the black swallowtail. Also might see the giant swallowtail and the python swallowtail, as most species you will see. But as you can see, I named only 4, yet I have 5 pictures. So let me start pointing them out. At the bottom here, we have the tiger swallowtail, which makes sense, kind of the coloration, the lines of the yellow and the black. Right above that, in the second one to the left, we have the python swallowtail, moving on to the black swallowtail and the giant swallowtail. So the picture at the top most left, we have the tiger swallowtail again, kind of crazy. So tiger swallowtail has 2 different morphs. So we have the normal morph at the bottom and the black morph at the top. So we have different looks depending on which can make it a little harder to ID, especially between the tiger swallowtail and the black swallowtail. But I can see here on the back of the wings, as the tiger swallowtail has 2 rows of yellow, oranges, kind of depends on what it looks like in the field, but while the black swallowtail only has 1 set of orange. So that kind of helps narrow down which one you see in the wild. But when you look at the tiger swallowtail, black morph, and the black swallowtail, look at the top of the wings, they look pretty similar to the python swallowtail. You might be wondering, why is that? We have 3 different types of species that kind of all resemble each other. That's because they're mimicking the python swallowtail. The python swallowtail, you won't really find it as much here in the Midwest, or they're more southern US, but it's still definitely possible. But so, pipeline swallowtail, similar to the monarch, eats a plant called pipevine, ironically, part of the name. And the pipevine also has a chemical that is very distasteful. So similarly, he's as a caterpillar, gets absorbed into the body, and as an adult, is able to rock these colors to say, "Don't eat me." But tiger swallowtail and the black swallowtail have been able to capitalize on this disgust of the pipeline swallowtail and mimic their forms. So the black swallowtail being like almost entirely its entire body, pretty similarly to the pipeline swallowtail, while the tiger swallowtail having a morph, which is a pretty cool that you have two different species just all mimicking the same one. Next, I go on to the gossamer wings. The gossamer wings make up 30% known butterflies on Earth, which is pretty cool. It has this one family of butterflies, has so many different species within it. So these butterflies are generally pretty small. Some of them are pretty like inches in wingspan, which kind of makes them hard to see. Even sometimes when you have it flying around, are you actually a butterfly or are you a moth? It's kind of hard to tell, especially in the blues. They're flying by, it's like whizzing by your eyes. It's like kind of hard to ID. But when they land down, you can see the pretty colors, especially the blues here, the American copper right here in the middle, with the harvester, Eastern. So we have a bunch of different butterflies. But I will be focusing here on the Carner blue for the moment. So the Carner blue is an endangered butterfly that's found throughout the Midwest and a few areas more in the eastern areas of the country, and is requires the plant of a wild lupine, which is also endangered. So it's kind of has this endangered plant, endangered butterfly, kind of bad combination there. But there are conservation efforts happening here in Wisconsin and other areas to help continue the populations. But I'll give you a fun fact about this family. About 75% of them have a relationship with ants. So whether that's eating ants, some of them have these chemicals that cause ants to think they're ants and feed them. So they'll feed them, protect them. And when they just throughout the entire, as a caterpillar, as a chrysalis, and then eventually when it emerges as a butterfly, it will mosey on its way out of the caterpillar's nest. And so, yeah. And some of them also, as caterpillars, also might have glands in the body that may be used to communicate with ants. So also a pretty cool feature that this group of butterflies have. Now, shifting from the gossamer wings, we have the brushfoots. Brushfoots, while not making up as many butterflies as the gossamer wings do, they have a large amount of diversity. So I see with these 5 pictures, we have a varying range of colors, shapes, sizes. We have a lot of them. So I'm going to focus on the first family. The subfamily we focus on is Valier, which contains a wide range of butterflies that I cannot picture all of them. So we have 3 choices. We have 3 of them here. I have the morning cloak at the top. We have Eastern comma with a Baltimore checker spot, but we also have many more. We have crescent, so like northern crescent, pearl crescent. The other commas, we have the question mark, the Compton tortoise shell. We have ladies, the painted lady. We have the red admirals. We have a lot of butterflies in this one category. And I'll focus, just since there's so many, can't really give all them justice, but I'll focus on one. So at the top we have the morning cloak here, like I said, has that like yellowish gold tinged side, which I think makes it pretty easy to identify. So morning cloaks live pretty long as adults. They can live up to like 11 and 12 months as a butterfly, which comparatively to like other insects like dragonflies, like will live like a month flying around when the most of life is just larvae. That's pretty long. And they have pretty interesting ways to against predation. So like many animals out there, they have camouflage. So on the back of their wings, they bring a little more woody texture, color to it to blend in with the trees that they inhabit. They can also join together in like a large grouping and like fly at a predator if there's a lot of them and deter the predator that way. They can also play dead, which is pretty cool. Imagine like a dog playing dead, but also a butterfly, in my opinion. So they'll close their wings, have their wings lay on their side, and then just pretend like it's well, yeah, it's dead. Also, they can make a click sound, which can deter predators. So if I was a predator trying to eat this, I'll be kind of surprised of a butterfly making noise at all. That would definitely scare me, which I would look up a video of it, was surprising. It wasn't as loud as others described, but still surprising nonetheless. So next, I'm gonna move on to the subfamily Pelargoniae, which you look in the top right here, with this great sprinkled fritillary, my favorite butterfly, because this looks great in my opinion. So there are not many fritillaries here in the Midwest. So we have, like I said, the great sprinkled fritillary, which is featured here. We have the Freya fritillary. We have the Aphrodite. We have a few of them. They all kind of rock the same sort of coloration. So the browns, the oranges, with the black scattered in between. Some of them are pretty hard to get across if just looking at it at a glance in the field, but if it's on the flower, you can kind of tell because you have different amounts of that varying coloration, especially with some of them are, like the meadow fritillary is kind of pretty smaller compared to the others. So we have kind of easy to tell, but they're nice to see. They're pretty, in my opinion. Next, I will go on to the subfamily Lamentidae, which contains the white admirals, red spot purple, and the viceroy. But these will be talked about later as they have their own special story to tell. And lastly, we have the satyrs. Satyrs at the bottom right here, rocking eye spots, very woody butterflies. You know, use the eye spots as help with predation, as you know, it protects from their actual head. So pretty cool, pretty nice to see. This one here, the low wood satyr, is pretty small, but they're very plentiful earlier in June. Just saw a bunch of them flying around. Well, it's a cool sight to see, especially when it lands. You can get a chance to appreciate its coloration and their eyes they have. Now onto the white admiral and red spotted purple. So white admiral is found around here in the Midwest and up, so into Canada, while the red spotted purple is found here in the Midwest and down. So this area in the Midwest, along with some other states and areas, is where you see both these two grouped together, which is pretty cool to see. And looking at the butterflies, you might think, oh, it's pretty cool. It's two different butterflies, but they're actually the same species. So similarly with tiger swallowtail, you have just two different morphs of it, but unlike the tiger swallowtail, they don't normally, most of the populations do not exist at the same time. So they're grouped as subspecies. And so here in the Midwest is where you can see hybridization between these two subspecies of the butterflies. And you can see different morphs, different colorations of the two different hybrids of the two, which is pretty cool. So you might look at the red spotted purple, which is the one on the top, and the white admiral. We can tell by the white band on it that red spotted purple is kind of has a blue tinge to it. And it might remind you of a butterfly earlier that I discussed, called the pied swallowtail. Yes. Once again, the pied swallowtail has inspired another mimic. We have a lot of mimicry of the pied swallowtail here in the Midwest. So once again, red spotted purple is another form of a mimic of the pied swallowtail, which I think is pretty funny how there's so many of them mimicking the same species. Now we go on to the viceroy. So let's give you a few seconds to figure out which one do you think is the viceroy, which one do you think is the monarch, since they have pretty similar coloration. So on the far left here, we have a female monarch, which you can kind of see the big bands of lines on its wings. You can't really see if there was a dot, you couldn't be able to see here, but that's the good indicator. So here in the middle, we have the viceroy, and then here on the right, we have the male monarch. You can see a dot here, pretty thin lines on its wings. So the viceroy is, once again, part of the brushwoods. And you would think, normally like the other ones, as a python swallowtail is the harmful one, and they have these other species mimicking it and are harmless. That was once thought the same way as the viceroy mimicking the monarch and subsequently the queen for the south, but that's not Midwest, so we're not going to talk about the queen. Thought, oh yeah, this is a harmless species mimicking the harmful species, trying to capitalize on a coloration, but found that the viceroy is also can be pretty distasteful to predators. So instead of one specifically copying the other is that these two species have co-evolved very similar forms to both utilize their own distastefulness and get even extra protection, which is pretty cool. Now I'm going to move on to the skippers. Skippers, there are two types of skipper, two main groups of skippers we have here in the Midwest. We have the spread wing skippers and we have the grass skippers. So just moving left to right, we have the silver spotted skipper, which you might guess from the white little band here. And then we have the Delaware skipper, then we have the common checker spot, and last we have the leaf skipper. So the common checker spot and the silver spot skipper are spread wing skippers, which kind of have similar bodies, but you can tell by just looking at them, they have different wing placements. The silver spot skipper has their wings up on his body, while the common checker spot has them more parallel with his body. And the grass skipper have very similar body shape, wing placement, same coloration here. To be honest, if I didn't have them labeled on my notes, I would have placed them where they were. I would not be able to tell which one was a Delaware, which one was the least, just by looking at the eye. Because also, I'm not that too knowledgeable on skippers, but just learning more about them, making this makes me appreciate them a little more. Skippers are pretty erratic flyers, I would say. They, unlike other butterflies, kind of fly like they have no sense, in my opinion. But they're cool to look at. I haven't seen many skippers here in my time here in Wisconsin, but back in Michigan, I've seen plenty of silver spotted skippers just like flying around with no care in the world, which is pretty cool to see. So I gave you a lot of different butterfly knowledge. So what can you help? If you want to help with conservation of butterflies, there are many things you can do, probably more than I can name on top of my head. See, we have, you can donate to funds, especially like helping the Cardinal Blue if you so desire. You can always have like butterfly gardens within your yard. But also, if you're gonna make a butterfly garden, why not support the moths too? They're the nighttime workers as we are asleep. So they're important for the environment. So if you're gonna make a garden, you can always help the moths. They deserve some love too, even though I don't know much about them. And there are plenty of ways to do that. So go out there, look at your butterflies if you want, learn more about them, and just enjoy nature.